Everyone. I am Eve Crevoshay. I am the Executive Director of Take This, and thank you, Dr. B, for introducing the organization while I got myself back online. My internet failed for a moment. We are really pleased to be presenting this webinar series and crisis conference in partnership with the IGDA, and hope to see you here weekly over the next month to discuss issues of importance during this current pandemic situation. I'm going to start this particular Self-Care 101 panel by inviting our participants to introduce themselves, and I'm going to start with Pat.
Okay. Hi, I'm Pat Kemp. I'm a game designer at a company called Spry. We are a all-remote studio, so we don't have any physical office, and we work remotely all the time.
Thanks, Pat. B. Dr. B.
Well, I'm happy to talk again.
Please go ahead.
But how about I pass it off to either Kelsey or Renee?
Great. Kelsey, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelsey Wesley. I am currently the Diversity, Inclusion, and Learning Lead at Bungie. I have actually been working in diversity and inclusion in gaming and tech since 2011. And I've actually had quite a bit of experience working from home in my two previous companies at Electronic Arts and at Uber. As I traveled for those companies and worked remotely at different offices and also worked at home for flexibility. And what's been great is seeing the transition at Bungie and how we have transitioned from being an all in-person studio atmosphere to now being remote and working on our rituals and working on our practices in this new environment, and how my team has been supporting our employees to get used to this new normal. But I also have some personal experience working from home, particularly last year, dealing with a personal challenge of mine as I had two surgeries, one being unexpected, that prompted me to work from home for almost 2 months as well. So a bit of experience, not just doing it from the work kind of experience, but also understanding how I balanced that while I was dealing with a personal challenge as well.
Thank you, Kelsey. Renee.
So I'm the Executive Director of the International Game Developers Association. Our mission is to support and empower game developers around the world in achieving fulfilling and sustainable careers. I am also an indie developer, and I actually run my own game studio on the side. When I launched my studio in 2014, I actually started working from home and have worked from home for a number of years on and off over the last 8 years. I have worked from home approximately 4.5 of those, so I have a decent amount of experience working from home, and I do currently work from home for my role of the IGDA.
Great, thank you all. Given that background, I think we have a collective set of experience. I'm also experienced work from home person. I currently work from home and have off and on worked from home over the course of 10 years. But most of us at some point have worked in an office, and I want to know from all of you, what are some of the major differences you've noticed in your days at home versus your days in an office? Do you interact with colleagues differently? Do your work patterns change? What do you have to add to that? And I'll start this time with Renee.
So most of the offices that I've worked in have been open office formats, which some ways can be somewhat distracting, but on the positive side, it means you have a lot of casual interactions with your coworkers.
So I'm not sure what happened, and I'm not sure she hears us.
So I hear you just fine, and so does the stream. I'm running headset separately. I'll make sure to keep it awake. As I was saying, I've previously worked in open office environments, which have a lot of small casual interactions. And I think that before you work from home the first time, you don't understand how much social value there is in just casually interacting with people regularly. So I will work from home, and my partner who works in an office will come home and be burnt out, and I'll just be dying for social interactions. So I'll be pestering him and be like, hey, how's your day? How did things go? And he'll be much more exhausted because on top of working, he did have those social interactions. And he tends to be a little bit more introverted while I'm a little bit more extroverted.
Yep. Kelsey, can you fill us in on your experience?
Definitely. I would say that working from home, there's more of a routine and structure in place. Just for my time while I'm working, which is generally like around 8 to 5 or 9 to 6, where when I was working in an office, it was a bit more organic with what my routine was like, where it was a little bit more ad hoc throughout the day outside of set meetings. I still have those set meetings for working from home, but I also have a more structure around, like, outside of meetings, this is my set work time. And I think the organic aspect came to Renee's point around just the social interactions and things that would pop up from that. Because sometimes it wouldn't just be social interactions, but with those, hallway conversations, as we call them, there would be work that would just spring from that. And I don't see that organic ad hoc work kind of springing up as much in a work from home and remote kind of environment. It's much more structured.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Dr. B?
I have worked from home for so long at this point. I'm trying to go back and think about what it's like to be working in an office setting again. What I will say is, echoing several things that have already been said, the sort of ad hoc, spontaneous conversations that I largely considered a waste of time throughout the day back when I worked and commuted to an office. I missed those, like, immediately. I missed those, and I felt isolated when I started working at home. And I'm very fortunate that I live with my girlfriend, and we do somewhat similar work. And now that we live together, we can have those sort of collegial interactions. Her office is on the top floor of the townhouse. Mine is on the bottom floor. And, we meet for lunch. And we get to have these sort of organic bouncing ideas off of each other interactions. But before that, it was weird having to basically schedule organic meetings with open video time with colleagues. It's so strange to work from home when you're not used to it.
Yep. Yeah. Pat, I know you've worked from home for a long time, but you've had both experiences, right?
Yeah, so I've been with the Spry Fox for 8 years now, which has been working remotely that whole time. But before that, I worked at in-person offices, anywhere from small indie type things with like 4 or 5 people in a single room up to big, corporations with hundreds of people and cubicles and stuff. And I think, the biggest difference to me is, everyone has already touched on it, is kind of the socializing, the stuff we take for granted. I think there's some, other aspects to that. Like there's a thing we talk about a lot at Spry Fox is how we build familiarity and trust in a team, which is really important for creative work, and how we're able to do that when we don't have those kind of casual socializing things. Like, how do we create that, in a remote environment so people who have never met in person, or maybe see each other in person once or twice a year, can still feel like they know each other and trust each other. Has been a thing we talk about and think about a lot.
What are some of the techniques you've used across the company to promote that?
Yeah, actually, one of our coworkers, Andrew Frey, gave a GDC talk, like, largely about this, about all the team building and trust techniques we do at Spry Fox. And we've tried a lot of things over the years. A lot of it is, the way he put it is inserting space for personality into just our day-to-day interactions. So we largely communicate through the Slack chat client. So it's just lots of text messages back and forth. And so little rituals like saying good morning and like the casual morning chat, having little, he just added a bot that asks kind of like an icebreaker morning question. Like today's was like, post pictures of your pets. And yesterday was like, what's something fun that happened over the weekend? And people just reply in thread to that. And it's weird. I think when you're starting out with it, it feels a little maybe artificial because, it's not that organic kind of natural socializing that comes, to people, but it really, the effects, are really positive. Those are some examples. We also do birthdays. We celebrate birthdays by when someone's birthday is coming up, someone else starts a Google Doc with everyone else in the company in the chat, and we all make like a Google Doc birthday card for them with like pictures or funny questions, and then present it to them on their birthday in lieu of like a birthday cake in the break room, right?
I've seen some of those, and they're pretty impressive. Thank you all. So transitioning a little from what you've always done or how you've experienced work from home other times, and Kelsey, you kind of already answered this, but how this is a pandemic. This is a different experience. How has your work from home situation changed since the pandemic started? And what changes have you had to make in order to accommodate these differences? And then I'll ask a follow-up question to Dr. B about some of the mental health symptoms, but just describe a little bit briefly. And Kelsey, do you want to start?
Sure. So I think what's been different, because, in my previous experience, I did work from home for the most part, but for the most part, not during difficult challenges, except for last year. And what I have found as far as similarities was understanding the importance of needing to take care of myself and give myself a bit of grace to manage my well-being, and balancing that with my work priorities. And I think one of the biggest tools that I've used to be able to find that balance is communication with my team and with my leaders, to let them know where I'm at, how I'm doing, and what I need to be able to manage through this time. And once I set that expectation and just provide more clarity to my teammates, the support that comes from just being able to have that open line of communication is so valuable, because unless you inform people about where you're at, they're just going to make assumptions and only really see it from their perspective. And it's really important to share your perspective so you can gain the support and guidance that you need, especially during difficult times, that I don't think that you generally would need to focus on so much if it was more of a regular working from home type of environment. And so I think that has been a big shift for me over the last month, is the needing to have more open lines of communication and just not sharing about what my work status is, but what my personal status is, to gain that support and guidance from my teammates and from my leader.
So it's a much more personal experience. A little
it definitely
bit.
Is.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that we need to focus on too, because it's not business as usual. This is a heightened stress and anxiety for a lot of people, which hits us on a personal level, but it impacts our work too. And we need to, be realistic about that, and in ways that are comfortable for us, be able to talk about that and express it with one another. So we don't just make assumptions about how people are doing, but we can have clarity around how people are doing and what they need.
Yeah, for sure. Renee, do you want to share a bit about your changes and experience?
Yeah, as we normally work from home, there hasn't been too many changes. However, I do think, like Kelsey noted, there is so many stressors that are just wearing down upon both myself and my staff, and the other people that I work with, that I'm making sure to be really cognizant of that and let people have time to talk about it when we have meetings. One of the benefits of having like an agile approach or structure is that you have regular check-ins. And I think that having daily stand-ups, particularly when you're not seeing the people you work with normally face-to-face, is a really good way to just share what you're working on and to also get a feeling of how they're doing and that normal social interaction. So I make sure I have 15-minute stand-ups with my staff members and have them talk to me not only about what they're working on, but what else is going on in their day.
Great. Pat, do you want to share how things have changed for you?
Sure. Yeah. I think for me, the day-to-day of how we do things at the company has largely remained the same, because we're used to this. We're used to remote working. For me, the biggest impact is on the childcare front. So I have two young daughters at home, a 3-month-old and a 2.5-year-old. my older daughter in particular was in full-time daycare, and she's not right now, so she's here. I can hear her through the door right now. So there's the distractions and stuff where, I can't, get a certain amount of time undisturbed without a visitor, which, obviously has its upsides as well. But I mean, just, sharing the childcare with my partner, I'm basically working half days because, we trade off taking care of the kids. So that's probably been the biggest thing. And another part of that too is, we had grandparents helping out with childcare here and there for little weekends off or a night off or something, where they take the kids, and that's not an option right now because we're all isolating. So it's been, pretty tiring.
Yeah. And I'll just jump in and take off my moderator hat for a second. I also have a kid at home, a 9-year-old. And that really has been, one, it's been the biggest change. And two, I noticed that it's hardest for her among the three of us, because my husband and my daughter and I, because she's lost all of her normal anchors, her friends, her routine, her school. And so it's her mental health and her, plus her routine and her schooling and stuff that are all of a concern. So that's a big change. Yeah. And so, Dr. B, I want you to weigh in on your own changes, right? But I also have a question for you, which is, generally, what are some of the biggest changes we can expect to experience in terms of mental health here? And then I'm going to go back and ask all of you to reflect on whether or not you're feeling having those experiences.
Well, my changes, I echo a lot of what have already been said. Now, I don't have any kids at home, so that gives me certain advantages. That also, it also means I can focus more on work, which presents its own set of challenges. But when you sent me this question, what are some of the biggest changes we can expect in terms of our mental health? I just started listing things out, and I actually had to put a stop to it. There were so many things that I started listing out, and I'm not prone to hyperbole in the way I use my language. This is truly an extraordinary time. This is something that hopefully we see maybe once every generation or three. I can't think of the level of ambient stress that we've faced in this world since maybe World War II. The kind of mobilization that we're seeing. And as such, we're going to experience just a higher level of base stress. We're going to now suddenly deal with the anxiety of uncertainty. We don't know what's going on a day-to-day level. We've lost a lot of our routines, the things that anchor us to a sort of baseline set of behaviors and baseline set of stress, level of stress. We have to adjust to a new normal. We're now coping with not only social isolation, but loneliness, which is different than social isolation. Social isolation is just lack of social connectivity around us. Loneliness is where our social network feels broken and it's not giving us what we need. We might be dealing with a loss of hope. There's a lot of feeling that we may not be able to do anything. We may not be able to better our situation or the situation of the world. Just the changes in work, for the fact that our routines are so different that we have to adjust to what a new standard of productivity is, that our bosses have to adjust to that as well. And hopefully they do for everybody watching, that your bosses have a very different level of productivity expectations. But we also have to balance our needs with the needs of the people we cohabitate with, whether it's children, whether it's roommates, whether it's partners. There is so much that's been thrown our way in such a short time. It's staggering. And, give yourself permission. If you feel a little overwhelmed, well, that means you're paying attention. There's a lot to feel overwhelmed about. But we'll probably, I know we're going to get into this a little later, some of the things we can do to help some of these things. So for now, I'll turn it over to everyone else.
And Renee, I think I forgot to ask you about your changes and experience. So please weigh in now.
I talked a little about the changes, which aren't too significant.
Right.
However, I think probably the biggest change isn't with my workplace. I guess my workplace is my home in some extent. But I have two friends who are younger than me and both live alone. They are actually coworkers of my partner. And knowing that they were living alone and that there was potentially going to be an isolation call that would last weeks or months, we invited them to move in. So my biggest change is I suddenly have two new roommates. And I actually haven't lived with anybody but a partner for almost a decade. So suddenly having roommates again is quite the change for me. It's definitely a bit of a stress having different people in my house suddenly and not being able to relax quite the same ways. But I think it's actually a big relief for me because I am getting more social interaction in my household than I would normally. So overall, I think that's been a really good, healthy call for me, and I am happy that I made it. But it has involved some less sleep than usual nights due to different schedules.
Indeed. Pat or Kelsey, do you have reflections on what we've been talking about, what Dr. B brought up?
I can speak to my experience, and I actually want to connect it to my experience from last year and how I'm, experiencing what's happening this year, because this is more broad as how it's impacting. But I had a very acute experience last year where I had surgery that was planned from an injury. But what happened post-surgery is that I had a major infection that happened that actually, if I had waited any longer for it to be treated, could have been life-threatening. And it was a really stressful time for me to understand that my life was at risk at that point. And I think the thing that helped me get through it was two things. On the work side, I work for a company that really cares about its people and leaders who want to, in any way possible, accommodate our folks to help make sure that they are taking care of themselves first and setting them up for success so they can do good work once they're in a space to be able to do that. Having that support and that guidance from my work was so incredibly helpful that it really eased my mind, where I didn't have to stress about my security at work, about my priorities at work. They really flexed to be able to make sure I was working and caring for myself. And the other thing was social support. And I had visitors who came in and spent time with me. My mother actually spent a whole week with me, which was such an amazing experience out of the whole situation, a true silver lining. But what I think is different in this situation is, still having work that's supporting me and helping me set me up for success during this critical time, and understanding I need to take care of myself first in order to do good work, is I am missing that social aspect. But I think what's been great is the creative and innovative ways that people are starting to connect and having that be virtual. I am really grateful that I do live with my partner, and he has been actually here quite a bit, and our bond has actually grown through this experience because we've been supporting each other. But I've loved seeing how my friends who typically I never would have done FaceTime or have done Zoom or Skype with, now we're doing that on a regular basis, doing virtual, happy hours, playing games in that kind of way. So we can still have that social interaction, which I think is really key during this time. And even though we can't do it in person, it is so important to still connect with people. I call my parents every day. I talk to my siblings all the time, and I try to reach out to my friends as much as possible. And that social interaction, knowing that they're okay, really helps me get through this time. But it's just, and I had that last year, but that was in person. And this year now it's virtual, but it's still bringing that ease and that peace of mind to me through, this crisis, and that we're all in this together. We're all supporting each other through this.
I'm sure I'm not the only one who's had a D&D session start on Roll20 over this.
Indeed, yeah. Yeah, my husband's had one going. Yeah, Pat, do you have any way? I think you spoke a little bit already about this in terms of the changes you've had, but are there mental health changes that you've experienced?
Yeah, I think for me and my family, the biggest change has been, obviously our day-to-day routine has been disrupted, and that's a huge part of, especially our toddler. Like, having her have a daily routine is kind of safe and secure and predictable for her, but also makes things a lot more manageable for us, like things like bedtime and the morning routine and stuff, having that be kind of predictable and easygoing. And I think when this all started and we pulled her out of daycare, there was this, we had this period of kind of like being just lax and permissive about everything, where we're just like, yeah, you can wear your PJs. This is weird. You're not going to daycare today. No, you're not going to daycare today either. We're just going to play all day. And which, felt fun and easy at the time, and we probably needed that at the time. But now we've been sort of like transitioning out of that phase into, okay, we're going to be doing this for a long time. We can't always just wear PJs all day or have a bedtime that lasts 2 hours. So we're kind of like rebuilding either our old routine or some semblance of a new routine. So there's all kinds of pieces of that. And, like for me personally, like just getting an exercise and, the way we eat and stuff has been changed a lot. I can't go to my gym, and I can't do like frequent grocery shopping like I used to and prepare meals and stuff. So it's, everything about just our day to day has been disrupted, and we're kind of figuring out how to build up those things that, allows us to feel good and get good, get the sleep we need and have the energy levels we need. Still putting that together at this phase.
Yeah. I think it's really important to note the transition in terms of our experience and our relationship to this whole thing is that, first we thought, there were a lot of local, state, and federal government indications this was going to be a short-term thing. And then suddenly it became clear that it was going to be at least a midterm thing. And now we're wondering how long it's going to go. My daughter's camps are starting to get canceled for the summer. And so we're starting to adjust to this idea that this is going to last for a really long time. And so I think it's a constantly changing experience and evolving, and and recognizing what it means to manage this is going to keep being different, right? And that's disconcerting and a little bit disorienting, right?
Yeah, I think that the stress of unknown is one of the things that weighs on me the most. Like for the IGDA, we had so many events planned for GDC. We had 5 events, 27 roundtables, a booth, an annual meeting, and a board meeting. And not knowing if that was going to get canceled was so stressful. It was actually almost a relief when we heard that it was being postponed, because there was some sort of decision finally made there. And right now, there is so much unknown. We don't know how long there's going to be calls for isolation. We don't know the wide-reaching effects of this. And I'm someone who always I'm just endlessly curious. But that also means I'm spending far too much time like looking at the current rates and trends of infection spread, or of the stock market, or of anything else that I can get my hands on. And I'm trying to get away from that, because I realize that doing that so much it's almost like picking at a scab, right? You just have to let it go a bit and heal a bit more.
And I would like to actually piggyback off of what Renee is saying. And Dr. B, I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well, because I think when we're dealing with times of uncertainty, and it's stuff that's outside of our control, that we, in order to be able to find that place of balance to lessen our strength and stress and anxiety, it's focusing on the things that we can control. And that's not just a mindset thing, but what can we do within our physical space as well? And I know that there's a lot of things about, your mindset and understanding that, hey, what I can control is my environment, my routines, reaching out to my people and knowing that they're okay. And that's within my sphere of control. And that really helps bring that sense of certainty and relief. And I think a key part of that is having a normalcy as much as possible, which is like a normal routine. getting up in the morning still, taking your shower, brushing your teeth, putting on clothes, and like having breakfast before you start work, and not just like getting out of bed and starting work right away, right? Having that kind of normalcy to your routine that you can control really can help provide some of that groundedness that you need to be able to manage through the other stress and anxieties of stuff that is uncertain, that's out of your control.
I'm just going to pour myself a drink and let you take this away, because you're doing it so well. You're talking about so much that I would say, and you're doing it so well. I'll just kick my feet up and let you have the stage. Routines are super important because we've lost so many of them. And whatever cues we can build into our days to let us know that we're at work versus home. I've been saying this a lot lately, that I hate the term work-life balance, because work is a part of life. Okay, you can't separate those two, but what you can do is create work-home separation. And especially when you're working at home, that's a really important thing to do. And there's a lot of ways to do it. One is transition time, transitional routines. I get up, I make a cup of coffee, I watch The Daily Show. And then at 10 o'clock, I'm at my computer in a separate space. Now, I have the luxury of having a separate space that's just for work. But there's other things you can do as well that are sort of visual and sort of behavioral cues to get you into those routines and give you a sense of empowerment and that sense of normalcy. One is I still wear work clothes even when I'm here alone. I don't wear a tie every day these days, but I'm still wearing my work clothes. I have my routines. One that I heard was great is before someone goes to work at home, they walk around the block. That's their commute. And the same thing when they end for the day at the same time every day. That's their commute home. I have lunch scheduled. But in terms of setting up visual cues, other things you can do, I've heard that people have different keyboards for work and for play. You don't get out your nice Corsair gaming keyboard when you're working. Different mice, different screens, different, even just different accounts on your computer that don't have Borderlands 3 on them. That's not personal experience at all. Working from home is a very different skill set, and it takes time to develop. And give yourself, if you're new to this, give yourself some compassion, give yourself some forgiveness, because this is not something you can just boom, go into. But creating those routines, creating those cues, creating that sense of controlling what you can control also gives you a sense of empowerment that gives you the energy to get through this and to help out the people around you who might need that help.
Yeah, Pat, I'd be curious to hear you reflect on how that is made significantly more difficult with kids around, and what you might have done to be able to try and find a sense of control or boundaries around that, because I think the experience that parents are having right now is particular.
Yeah. I mean, part of it is just like we were talking about earlier, like adjusting our expectations for productivity. It's my normal 8-hour day is non-existent right now. But we have, between trading off childcare with my partner, kind of carved out a block of time in the morning where I do mornings with the kids, and she can get some extra sleep, and then I close the door to my office and get, especially when my older daughter's napping, that's like my 2 hours of like really solid productivity. And then when she wakes from nap, I take over again and we're playing outside and doing all that stuff. So it's similar. I mean, my old routine also was bookended by my older daughter activities, taking her to daycare and picking her up. So it kind of feels similar in that sense. It's just a much smaller time window, and then there's we I keep the door closed now as kind of like a signal to her, and especially when I'm on calls and stuff. It's not always an observed signal. It still comes in, but which is fine. Like I don't, it's fine. I think also part of it too is, part of the adjusting to the productivity thing is just sort of planning, my work tasks in such a way where like, if I need some really high concentration tasks, like I know where to put that. That's when my daughter's napping, right? And then sort of moving around my tasks that can be interrupted to times when I'm likely to be interrupted. So, yeah.
Yeah, I have found the need to do a similar thing. And my husband and I work in separate spaces. We're very lucky to have an additional building on our property. So he has a separate space. And so we can, if need be, right now, I'm busy. I am very busy. I can't be interrupted. My daughter has a FaceTime lesson with my sister, which is really amazing. But they're out in the barn in our backyard doing that work, so that that's a clear signal that I am not interruptible. And it's those kinds of tools that you have to figure out how to use. Doors are really important. And luckily I have a 9-year-old. She's more able to figure that out, right? She knows if the door's closed, that means I'm busy and unavailable. So we touched a little bit on this too, about kind of routines and things. What are the ways that you use to start your day? Are they always the same? How do you end your day? Are there rituals or practices you do to kind of give yourself some bookends? Yeah, Dr. B.
Oh, absolutely. I take the time to prepare coffee every morning, and I really I don't do instant coffee. I do it the long and slow way, partially because I'm a culinary snob, but partially because it gives me the time to reflect and sort of transition in, especially if you have any sort of executive functioning challenges like ADHD, autism, or any sort of neurodiversity concerns. Transition time is really important. I'm not able to multitask to save my life. So me actually having those rituals gets me in the headspace for now it's work time. Shower, put on work clothes. Work clothes are a great cue for me. But at the end of my day, it's the same thing. I shut my computer off, I leave my workspace, and I go upstairs and I start preparing dinner, because that's also relaxing for me. It's creative and it's a way I can express myself. So yeah, coffee in the morning, dinner at night, home cooked every night, because that's also self-care for me.
Do any of the others of you have some routines you want to share or practices?
Yeah, my routine is pretty close to Dr. B's. I must admit, the first thing that I do when I wake up, though, is quickly look at my work email to make sure nothing's on fire.
Oh yeah, that too.
Or else I'll just have like the entire start of my morning is pure stress. So I always take a quick peek at my work email. And then I have pets. So I get up, I go downstairs, I make the pets breakfast. Then I make myself breakfast or just tea. And I actually have a nice little back stoop area into my yard, which then is preceded by a nature preserve. So I'll sit out on the stoop no matter how cold or hot it is and drink my tea. And that really helps me relax and reinvigorate myself for the day. I really enjoy active meditation. So I find gardening, cooking, martial arts, other activities like that are really mentally rejuvenating for me. And so is sitting there just enjoying the outside and drinking my tea. After that, I start my workday. I try to keep my workdays scheduled approximately the same. So I have the first 2 hours for just hardcore digging into emails, getting some serious work done. Then I go into meetings, and then for my lunch break, I go outside and I run the dog by playing fetch with her and call my parents. So my first big social break of the day is always calling my parents. After that, it's whatever the afternoon requires of me. And in the evening, I actually switch around 6 p.m. for working on IGA work to my indie development work. And then after that, I go into making dinner and finally relaxing.
You have a busy day.
Yeah. That's okay. I like it that way. So
Yeah. Yeah. Kelsey, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to share. So my routine in the morning is relatively the same. I get up and get ready. I always have had the news on in the background as I'm getting ready, which is still a routine that I have today, although I am trying to limit my news intake, but I still carve that time out in the morning, which has been my typical time to do that. And then I do check my email the same as everybody else just to make sure nothing's on fire. But then I, get my coffee ready, say goodbye, honestly, to my partner as I go into my room as though I'm leaving for work. And then I just organize my day as I usually would, looking at my calendar, understanding what I need to get done, and carving out that time in my calendar when I'm not in meetings to work on tasks. So that has stayed relatively the same. I would say actually one good thing that's come out of this situation as far as my routine is concerned that I didn't have before is now I've blocked out noon to 1 for lunch. Before I didn't make that time when I was in the office, and now I am purposely putting that time in place so I can just close my laptop, go and make lunch, sit down for a little while, relax, and then come back and refocus for the afternoon for my work. And then I keep to a time where I really try to turn off my computer between 5 and 6 and make sure that I'm not really on after 6 unless there's some sort of emergency, but put some boundaries around that. And again, I can physically close my laptop, turn it off, and leave the room and close the door. So I just don't even think about work because I don't even see my work computer. And then I do the same thing as many other people do, right? Relax into the day, potentially exercise, do dinner. But I think another good thing that's come out of this experience is that I've gone on evening walks almost every day. Being in Washington State, that is still something that our governor is encouraging us to do in a responsible kind of way. And I have found that to be a good way to end my day, to get some light exercise, but to go outside and get some fresh air and to kind of explore different parts. I live in Seattle that I hadn't really seen before, which has been kind of a fun little adventure at the end of the day. So that's the new aspects of my routine. So I've actually included a few things that I didn't do before, but that I have found some real value in.
Great. Pat, do you have anything to add, or?
My daily routine schedule sounds kind of similar to a lot of folks. I mean, the morning routine definitely involves coffee and shower and getting dressed as, cues for myself to get into a not just work mode, but awake and functioning mode. Cooking, meal times. I do most of the cooking at home, so meal times are kind of like bookmarks and bookends and that sort of, that's part of the routine is cooking breakfast for everyone and lunch for everyone and dinner for everyone. So pretty similar.
Thanks. The other question I have, there are two other questions I have before we go to questions from the streaming audience. The first is, before you started working from home, what is the one thing that you wish someone had told you?
So for me, what I wish someone had told me before starting to work from home is what works for other people working from home doesn't necessarily have to work for you working from home. Because there are some people who are like, you absolutely need to shower and get dressed 100% before you start your work day. My favorite thing is working in my pajamas. So I'm not one of those people. I am so much more comfortable when I'm wearing like comfortable clothes instead of work clothes. And it's one of my favorite things of working from home. So if that doesn't work for you, it doesn't have to. But probably the best piece of advice that I did receive about working from home is have a start and end. because it is so easy to have your work and your home life just completely blend together, and you'll never have separation, and you'll never feel like you're getting enough work done. You'll never feel like you're able to fully relax. Having that clear separation is so healthy and really makes it a lot nicer.
Yeah, thanks, Renee. I think that sense of like what works for everybody else might not work for you is really important, especially right now, because we all experience the stress and the oddness of this time differently, and we all have our own personal preferences and needs that we have to accommodate, right? I have worked in yoga clothes from my desk for years, and I will continue to do that. And some days I decide to put earrings on, and those are big days. So please, everyone recognize it's a big day. But there are certain things that are really important to me, like getting on my yoga mat every morning, that are kind of non-starters if I don't do. And not everybody needs to get on their yoga mat every morning, but I've been doing yoga off and on for 20 years and teaching it. And so yoga is really important to me, right? So that don't think about it as a one size fits all situation. Find the things that work for you and allow those to be. And I have to say that with those of us who have kids at home right now, I do also try to enforce start and end times and a lunch where, I've got to make lunch for my daughter and stuff. Those are important, but I found I've had to flex my time a little bit more, simply because there are moments when my daughter needs me, or I need to take advantage of the afternoon to get out on a walk with her. So it's recognizing and giving yourself as much grace and compassion. I've heard both of those words from all of you today as possible. It's really important. Yeah. And I know I want to leave room for questions, although I don't see any popping up yet. Put them in the chat if you're interested in asking questions. But there is another question I have for everyone first. And I think this one's a really important one. If you've got other people at home with you, which everyone on this call does, how are you taking steps to find and carve out both work and like family, roommate, social time? And is that all time with people in your house? I think we've answered this, but and how are you finding ways to interact with people outside of your house?
I'll go ahead, Dr. B.
Oh, no, please.
I'll just say real quickly, because I've already actually mentioned it before, but I set aside that hour during lunch, and that's when I actually have social time with my partner, and I say, goodbye to him as though I'm going to work when I go into my room to work. But I think it's the being more intentional of reaching out to my friends and to my family during this time. And I've been making more of that a routine, where it was just more organic before when I was thinking of them. But now I've actually made it a thing where I try to at least every other day reach out to those people who are the most important to me, especially my family. And I'm being much more intentional with that, because I can't see my parents as often, even though they live in the area, but I still want to connect with them. So it's instead of it just being an afterthought, I actually put it at the forefront of my mind to be proactive and reach out to those people who care, who I deeply care about.
Yeah, that's great.
We actually build our interactivity time into our schedule. When the social isolation started, we had overt discussions about how much alone time do we need, how much togetherness time do we need, and how are we going to eat. So what we ended up doing is that she's responsible for lunch and also making sure I eat lunch, because I will very easily forget. I mentioned my autism. I can hyper-focus a little too much. But also I'm responsible for dinner. And once those things are out of the way, then, one, we're eating together and we're creating time for each other. But two, once that's done, it's just hangout time, do whatever we want. And lately it's been a lot of Animal Crossing. Got that stringfish.
So I actually had a regular social schedule when I was working from home prior to social isolation. That was Tuesday night was date night, Wednesday night and Saturday nights were raid nights. Thursday nights I'd go out with my friends from my guild for dinner, and Friday nights I'd have friends come over, which meant that 5 nights of my week actually had social plans every single week unless something happened. And it turns out that's how much social interaction I need when working from home to be in a really happy state, which is more than I ever expected. This is the first time that I have had so much planned social interaction. However, now with the stay-at-home orders in my area, I'm in Baltimore, and that has changed. Luckily, I have 2 new roommates, so we do dinners and lunches, all of us together, every single one. I generally make most of them myself, but I love cooking. I still have my raid nights on Wednesdays. Unfortunately, my guild is killing things too fast to have Saturday raids anymore. And then my Thursday dinners with my guild mates has actually turned into Dungeons and Dragons. Or if the DM is not prepared for that, we're all stressed, we instead substitute some other game. And still have my Friday night drink and play video games, and overall it's been working out pretty well for me. I still feel like I'm getting all of the social interaction I need, probably because those interactive lunches are really filling in the gaps.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I do have a question from the chat that's kind of interesting, and I'll read it out to everyone. You were all talking about children dealing with living at home and telling them the separation of work time and home time, but how do you do it for parents, like those who are in content creation whose folks are always trying to get them out in the world? And it sounds like that question is really about people who live with their parents. And I think that's an important question. If you are in a situation where you're quarantined with multiple generations and you're trying to work and respond to that, how do you signal to other folks that you need uninterrupted time in a situation where normal routines and normal separations just don't exist?
I can speak to that a little bit, because even though I don't live with my parents, I do talk, and this was before, the situation that we're currently in. My mom calls very often, especially since she's been retired, and she's very much like me, an extrovert who needs a social connection. But I think it actually went up another notch with the stress and anxiety of the COVID-19, working from home, and the uncertainty around that. And so my mom would call me just at random times throughout the day, including when I'm in meetings and so forth. So I had to set the expectation with my mother that I have meetings throughout the day, so I might not be available or talk for as long as you would like to. So the best time for me to have a long conversation with you is after 5 p.m. And I'm more than happy to have those conversations with you. But during the day, text or call if it's an emergency, and know that I only have a few minutes. But it's just setting those expectations with my parents and creating some boundaries, but giving them options about when I can connect with them more and when I can, talk or socialize and have that time with them. And I really feel like my mom needs that. So instead of me saying, no, you can't call me during this time, providing options to let her know when, I think gave her some reassurance and certainty.
Yeah. I think that's great. That's something we've been trying to balance. My parents are in a different time zone. And so the times that are convenient for me are hard for them. And so it's been a process of trying to figure that out, negotiate that. Yeah. So, anyone else have any last thoughts before we finish up the stream?
Actually, I think I probably had a somewhat unique experience. I went through a period where my own mental health was not great. I had a sort of severe situational depression. And during that time, I actually chose to move back in with my parents. In my mid-20s, still being what I considered a fairly professionally successful adult. So I certainly had the experience of working while living at home. And what worked really well for my family is we actually installed an extra door to the area where it was going to be my workspace. And I left that door open unless I was working or couldn't be disturbed. And that became a very clear sign to my parents that, hey, when this door is shut, like, this is my own private time. And thankfully they respected that, and they respected that space. And it actually ended up being a very comfortable situation.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, and if you don't have a door, maybe a sign, a little piece of paper, you know, on the back of your chair or something.
This is something we actually built into a Take This training recently that I'm dubbing the Brazilian steakhouse method of productivity. For anybody who's ever been to a Brazilian steakhouse, you know that you put the little token on green if you want them to come shove more meat on your plate, and red if you're done, you're calling it quits. But using like Post-it notes or something similar in your work area to signal to people that, hey, I can't be disturbed right now, or hey, you can talk to me. I actually like a 3-part system, red, yellow, and green. Green means come, you know, Post-it. Green means come talk to me if you want. Yellow means I really need to concentrate. And red means do not interrupt me.
That's really cool. We have one last question, and I know we are over time. Is it all right if we address that last question?
Yeah, that's fine.
Great. So Kiliana is asking, how are you managing the morbidity and negativity of the current state of things? In terms of self-care, I think mental health is very important, and truer words have never been spoken. I'm going to drop a couple of links into the chat that are resources that we've put out on our website. In terms of managing stress and filtering media, so addressing media literacy and anxiety. And then I'd also like everyone's personal experiences around this.
I think being part of positive groups of people and positive communities, especially ones that work well with your interests or your discipline, is really, really helpful. So for me, I have 2 main communities. I have my World of Warcraft guild that I've been part of for 13 years, and I also have the IGDA. We have a Discord, we have many, many different Facebook groups and other communities, and I can always reach out there and find someone to connect with or talk to or just have casual conversations with, which helps me separate from what's going on. Or if I really feel like talking about it, I can even dive into it with those friends.
Great. Yeah. Pat or Kelsey or B?
Yeah, I think for me it's been in large part limiting my intake of just every article or piece of news that comes across, which, you know, for a while I was definitely kind of binging on a lot of that. And so now, you know, that's helped a lot, is, you know, just keeping my head out of it, especially the stuff that I have no control over. Or and then, yeah, what Renee said actually is very similar to me, like, you know, becoming involved more so with the communities I'm a part of. You know, like I've been in several kind of group Slacks and Discords for years, and all of a sudden they're very active. And people are, you know, having a bunch of cool conversations, and I'm feeling really thankful for not even having to go looking for those. They're just kind of there, kind of on the back burner, and all of a sudden they're on the front burner.
Yeah, they're super important. I want to thank all of you, Pat and Dr. B and Kelsey and Renee, for participating in this panel. I look forward to the next few panels, which will once again focus on the social, emotional, and community skills and approaches that we need to foster right now during this pandemic experience. So keep an eye on social media and on our websites, the IGDA and the Take This websites, for more information about upcoming streams as we pull those together. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.